Hi everyone, Victor Johnson here, creator of Lighting Up Paxton. It's now January 2015 and I figure it's a great time to do another behind the scenes video of my Christmas display. The last time I did a video was back in 2011 and there's been several changes since then, so I figure I'd give a full update about the display and kind of where things are at right now. My display is all incandescent with the exception of just a couple very small LED items. And because it's all incandescent and pulls so much power, it creates a bunch of challenges, which I'll talk about. It's 143,000 lights. Just this year we finished for 2014. I started with a static display almost a decade ago with just 25,000 clear lights. And then when I added the animation in 2011 with my last behind the scenes video, it was 192 channels of lightorama and 85,000 lights with red and green added. And then now, this year, it's 336 channels with 143,000 lights, all red, green, and clear. This will be my fourth year for music synchronization that I've just finished, using Lightorama hardware and software. So I've kind of made it through all of the growing pains now, and I'm pretty well on top of what's going on. And then also we're located here in Central Illinois in Paxton, which is why it's called Lighting Up Paxton, as our display name. So I get a lot of challenges to deal with as far as weather issues, from rain to snow to everything else in between. So that might come up a little bit as well. You probably noticed that this video is really long because I do go pretty in depth about all the items in the display, where I got them, where I got the ideas from, who those ideas originated from, and things like that. So this video will be full of lots of description, links to other sites, which I'll post in the description of the video down below, as well as annotations on the video to link to different things, as well as additional information, so be sure to leave those on. The topics I'll be talking about, since this is such a long video, you can link down in the description to all the topics if you want to jump to what you want to watch right now, or you can just stick around and watch the whole video. It's up to you. But the topics I'll be covering here are just about my Lightorama setup, as well as how I've mounted the controllers in the display, how I do my power management and extension cords with an all-incandescent display, some of my display signage, tree wrapping, including homemade net lights that I made myself, how I put lights up high in the trees, ground lighting elements, mini trees, tree lines using artificial trees and how I mount them in the ground, strobe lights, wire trees, mega trees, which my method is a bit unique for mega trees, window outlines, icicle lights, mounting C9s to gutters, and then mounting C9s to shingles, and as well as my Holdman Bethlehem star on the top of the roof. So those are all the topics we'll be covering, and again, you can click here or in the description to go jump to that part of the video right now if you want to. Power management of an all incandescent Christmas display can be a very complicated endeavor, and especially with 140,000 incandescent lights, I really have to get creative with how I plug stuff in, considering I only have 22 outlets on 22 separate circuits to work with. I do have them all GFCI protected. I am a GFI guy. I'm a big believer in them, and I'll always be using them. But we have everything running through a 200 amp service, which is 400 amps to 120 volt. So I have to be creative with how I work with that. And I have 3 colors on everything in the display, and the way it works out, I have several more clear than I do red and green. So of the 140,000 approximately, there are 60,000 clear, 40,000 red, and 40,000 green. And those are counting mini lights and the C9s that I use. And the all clear and white combination, when that all comes on in the songs that you see, those pull 250 amps. So I can turn all my white and clear on together and pull 250 amps. But my max I usually want to keep it at is no more than 300 amps, because I still want to be able to have some lights on inside the house, but not push that 400 amp threshold too close on the breaker box. So I try and keep it below 300. So because of that, I have to be really creative with where I plug stuff in and how I utilize my controllers, because I have many controllers that are actually running between 40 to 60 amps on them, when they may only be able to handle 30 amps if they're a PC controller, or 40 amps if they're a regular commercial grade controller. So I do all of that with this spreadsheet. that I have right here in front of me. So you can see I have everything listed. All my channels and the whole display are listed. This is a 40 amp controller, so I can get 20 amps through both sides. So you can see there's 1 through 8, and then there's 9 through 16. And these are my, this is how I line everything up in the display. Before I even started touching anything with a sequence editor, I made out the spreadsheet so I knew where all my display items were and where I could plug them in. And you can see I have everything labeled, how many lights I have used on them, and then I have columns for each type of light that I've used on that. So you can see just here on this second controller, controller number 2, on channels 1 and 2, those are some wire trees in the corner of the display that have quite a few mini lights on them. And you can see I use, for my mini lights, I use equivalent of 100 strands. So with 1,000 lights on them, even though they're a tree that had built-in lights, I just call it 10 strands. It helps me simplify it. And then you can see here some of the C9 lights I have, where they have 50 lights or 75 lights, and I count all my C9 lights by 25 count because they're all store-bought C9s. And you can see the nice thing about a spreadsheet is that it'll total everything up for you at the bottom of the page. And then I'll show at the end here my total for the whole display, which is really nice. It kind of, because you have a spreadsheet, it adds everything up for you, so you know every year what your light count is and what your amp usage is. But you can see here I also have so I label everything else by what kind of strands they are. Then I have my total strand number, and then this is where I start calculating the power usage. So I know that on my wire trees there, these are minis, so they use about 0.33 amps per strand. And then, so I have a total amps. I take that times the 10 strands, which is 3.3 amps. So every time I turn on this tree in white, it pulls 3.3 amps. And you can see the C9s here, where there's 50 and 75 lights, how they pull 3 amps and 4.5 amps, because they're usually about 1.5 amps per strand. And I got all these numbers based off of how the tags on the lights from the manufacturer list them. And I've noticed that they are fairly accurate on mini lights, but on C9s they're actually weighted just a little bit more. A C9 string that might be rated for the manufacturer using 1.5 amps might be closer to like 1.2 or 1.3. But I found mini lights pretty close to being right on. The Walmart lights that I've been using are all 0.33 amps per string, and then Lowe's and Target and some other stores are now selling more energy efficient ones that only use 0.2 amps. I've noticed those to be fairly accurate, so those are the numbers I use, and if I am overestimating it, at least it gives me a little bit of a power cushion. So the thing that gets pretty complicated with my setup is that because I have 3 colors on everything, and the white alone will pull 250 amps, and I can't turn more than one color on at once on most items. I have to be calculating how many amps not only everything uses, but how much of each color. So you can see here total amps for channels 1 through 8, which is the A and B, or which is the A side of this controller, so 1 through 9, which plug into one outlet. Which you can see here at the top, this uses my Northwest number 2 and Northwest number 3 outlets, so I have all my outlets in the display labeled. So if all these things were on, channels 1 through 8, it would pull 30 amps. Well, obviously, on a 40 amp controller, which is 20 amps on each side, I can only pull, 18 amps safely, maybe push it to 20, very seldom, but I would never do that. That's too many. So I know that I obviously can't turn everything on at once on this side of the controller and this outlet. So then what I do is, you can see where my ones are marked here. I have what I call the red/green amp and the red-green-white amp. And red/green means that only red or green will come on by itself with white. I will never turn red or green on at the same time. And then red-green-white means that I will only turn one color on at once. And so if I turned one color on at once, how many amps would it pull? So this is where I start getting a little more creative, and that's where you see the red-green amp difference and the red-green-white amp difference. So basically what I do is, on the red-green amp difference, I just find my green strings in the display, or whichever one is pulling the least number of amps, which on this 1 through 8 would be green-red about the same, so I just chose green. And you can see I just put a 1 in that column, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract that 3 amp and 4.5 amp from the green C9 strings on this side of the controller. And what I get is, if I take off those amps, take it down from 29 to 21.6. So I know that, well, I can't turn red and white or green and white on this 1 through 8 because that's still more than 20 amps. And even more than 18 is what I should be shooting for. So I know I can't do that, so I have to discount it further to red, green, white amps, meaning if I turn one color on at once, and I get 14.1. And you can see I do that by marking the ones here to subtract out the red as well. So what this ends up doing, the red, green, white amp difference, is that is just all the white strands on by themselves, which is my greatest amp load on this controller for what was on by itself. So that's how I get 1410. And you can see I do the same thing on channels 9 through 16 as well. So there are my items. There's some more C9s here along with some icicle lights. And you can see here how I've discounted the green on the red-green amp difference, and I take it down from 22 to 16. And then I discount the red and the green on the red-green-white amp difference to get 10, which is if I had just all the clear and white on at the same time. And then that gives me the total for the controller. So you can see what started out as an overloaded controller at 29.1 and 22 ended up being marked down to a 14.1 and 10, as long as I remember when I sequence that the items on this controller cannot be on at the same time on those colors. So you can see how complicated it is, but it actually isn't too bad as long as I just remember when I sequence I can only do one color at a time on these items, which are all pretty simple because they're mostly all C9 items. And you can see if I flip the page to another controller, it's the same setup. So here we're actually, these are all mini lights because these are all the windows, and the windows I have, window outlines I have, don't take much power. So you can see here, if I turn all the windows on this controller and all the colors that are listed, it only pulls just under 5 amps. And same thing with the one on channels 9 through 16, it just pulls under 4 amps. So you can see when I discount the red and green off, saying I only turn them on one color at a time, I get all the way down to 1.82 and 1.82, which for a whole controller total is 3.6. Well, you can see here, this one all goes on Northwest 2 outlet. So if I take the full 3.63 of white and clear only, and add that to the other Northwest 2, which is the 1 through 8 here, of 14.1, so that's 14.1 plus 3.63. So you see I'm just barely over 17 amps. I'll just about to 18 amps. So I can plug 3 plugs into that one Northwest 2 outlet. And the Northwest 3 outlet, which has, let's see here, 10 amps on it for clear only. I just have about another 8 amps available there too, so there's another controller in the display that will plug into the Northwest number 3 outlet. So you can see when I average everything together and I total it up on my total spreadsheet, you can see here my whole list of outlets and where the controllers can plug into them based off of every single sheet I have with the controller ID on the top. So after I get the amp loads set for every controller, then I play the game of what outlets can I match up with each controller. And again, like I said, the nice thing about having a spreadsheet is that I can total everything up at the end of the sheet that tells me my light count, my amp usage, and everything. You can see here that if everything was on display, it would pull over 650 amps. But because I limit myself to one color at a time, for white only would be 250 amps, or I do cheat on many of the songs and I do turn some white and red or white and green on at the same time, but only in limited fashion when other things are off, so I always stay under my 300 amp limit. And you can see that really well and how that affects everything in this neat video I record using one of my sequences, and you can see how my amps change on each leg of the breaker box, as well as voltage drop during one of my sequences, and I'll post a link in the description here on the video where you can see that. So I recommend you check that out because it's really neat to see how a mega incandescent display like I have affects everything involving power usage in a 200 amp service. I should mention, this idea originated from Richard Holman with how he only could turn on 2 colors at once on his display. Since my first year to my 4th year where I finally managed to get above his old light count, I'm limited even more, which is why I split it up into the red-green difference as well as the red-green-white amp difference. So I'll be sure to link to his original creation as well, where I kind of borrowed his idea, but I remade the spreadsheet in a way that works for me and is a little easier to read with more data on it as well. Because I also use this spreadsheet, as you'll see later in the video, to plug in all of my items in the display when it comes time to plug everything in. Since the very beginning, and even now, I'm still using the computer to run my Lightorama show. I'm now running S3, but I started out using the S2 version. But since upgrading, I really haven't changed anything with my sequence editor or how I make my sequences or how I run the show, and really not much has changed since my first year. I did update my channel configuration in 2012, but really most of the display almost didn't change at all. I use the computer to run the show because I like to be able to change and adjust the schedule on the fly. So say traffic gets really bad some night and I decide I want to readjust how some of the songs play or take a couple songs out, I can do it on the fly while the show is running, and I don't have to pull an SD card out and stop the show like I may have to if I was using an LOR director with an MP3 player or something like that. By using a computer, I can do everything on the fly. It also makes it really easy to adjust schedules day to day, or go on the computer and say I want to start the show early on just static so I can fix lights in the display before the show starts. The computer is really easy to make that happen, which is why I'm using it, and I will always be using it because of that purpose. With the computer, I am running 485 with booster from Lightorama. I chose the 485 with booster because it has the two Cat5 outputs versus one from the regular one. So all that does is, of course, it takes the USB port from the computer and changes it to LOR protocol that runs through the Ethernet Cat5 cables. So I use the booster because it gives me two Cat5 outputs, as well as if you had a long run to your controllers, it gives you extra voltage boost as well, so you don't have voltage drop in your Cat5 cables. But I primarily picked it for that purpose of having the two Cat5 outputs. And you'll see, I'll talk about my network repeater that I use here in just a minute as well. First though, the FM transmitter I'm using with my Lightorama setup, so everything's coming right out of the computer, so it comes out of the audio output of the computer. I'm using a CZH-5C 5-watt transmitter that I purchased online from Hong Kong back in 2011 when I first started. It's probably way too powerful than what I really need. I have it still set at the 1-watt setting, and even then it gets more than enough to go a few blocks. But I'm very happy with this transmitter. The only thing I wish it had was a timing function. But, well, the way the switch works in the transmitter, I can't put it on a timer and have it go on and off. It has to manually be switched every time the show comes on, which has been unfortunate, but I'm very happy with it. It came with a long antenna cable and a 5-foot tall adjustable antenna, so I had everything was ready to go, plug and play. If I ever had got another transmitter, I'd probably get a solder kit because I am familiar with soldering now, which I wasn't back in 2011. But I'm very happy with this transmitter. If I can find a link for it, I will post it here in the description of this video so you can take a look at it. Since I'm running the show with the computer and the 485 with a booster, I have to get the two Cat5 cables from inside outside, and the computer is actually located upstairs in a bedroom, so it makes it easy. I can just run the Cat5 alongside all of the cables that go up to the windows to control the windows, which I'll talk about in a bit. So the Cat5 just runs down the side of the house, and then I actually have both of the two Cat5 cables coming into here, and again into this box I'll talk about here in a little bit. And you can see the two Cat5 cables are actually the two black ones that come into here, and I have one of the Cat5s going into LOR network repeater. And all it does is it take one Cat5 and makes it into two without losing any signal strength. So it just repeats a signal to both outgoing wires. And the reason why I have need a repeater is because I have the two Cat5s coming out from the window and then down around the corner here, but I actually have 3 dead-end Cat5 locations in my display. Since this is the corner where everything comes down, I actually have one dead end on the other side of the front porch there after we get through the front porch. And then I have another dead end out at the maple tree out front here. We can see right through there the controller leaning against the tree over there. And then so that's another dead end. And then the other dead end is if we come around the corner here to the house all the way to the backyard tree way out there, which is wrapped in lights, where there's a one controller sitting out there. So those are my 3 dead ends. And because I have 3 dead ends, I need 3 Cat5 cables running to those locations. As far as my controller setup goes, I did mention I am running 336 channels this year, which is 21 controllers. And you can see here is one of the locations where I have several of those controllers. This is just one corner of the house. This is the northwest corner of the house, and I'll pay a visit over to the other side here as well. But you'll notice that I have both PC controllers, just the standard Planet Christmas issue LOR controllers, and actually all of my Planet Christmas controllers, I'll have 15 of them in addition to the 6 40 amp controllers in use. And all of these are just kits that I bought. I didn't give you the solder kit. I went and got the board assembled ones, but I did use the one we have to put the cords on. It's a good way to save money without having to spend tons of time. So I have 15 of these. As far as the 2011 controllers, the ones I purchased in 2011, which includes 6 of the 15, I've had horrible Triac problems with them this year. And if anyone wants to learn about Triacs or something like that, I'll post the Lightorama forum link in the description, as well as I made a video which I will link to in this video as well. You can go learn how to replace your own Triacs, because I've done a lot of that this year in 6 of my 15 PC controllers. So in addition to the 15 PC controllers, I have 6 of the 40 amp controllers, and these actually were the solder kits. You can't get the 40 amp controllers as solder kits anymore. These would be the boards that they put in the Showtime controllers with the big metal enclosure. I just ordered you can get the boards only still, but you can't get the solder kit. And I got the solder kit for these because they were so expensive, so I saved a bunch of money. And this is actually how I learned how to solder, so I know how to replace Triacs thanks to this. So I recommend anyone, if you're interested in replacing your Triacs, go ahead and next controller you order, get yourself the solder kit. It would have to be for the PC board, but it's a great way to learn how to, how everything in the computer system works and how to replace your own Triacs. So these boards I soldered myself. Worked great, everything worked when I was done. It's kind of shocking actually for someone who's never soldered before that time, but these have been running since my first year, and I had to have an enclosure for them since I didn't buy the full control box, and I just used 5-gallon buckets, and it's actually worked excellent. You can see I just have the 12 gauge inputs coming in, and then they go onto the board, and then all the outputs is just SPT1 wire, which I'll talk about in a bit, and they just have vampire plugs snapped right onto them. So those are actually my outputs. You can see I just labeled the channel numbers. So this one here is 1 right here, and so I've got 6 of these in use, and they've been working out great for me. So you can see everything's just wired together with the Cat5 cable. I found a really good source of Cat5. I'll post that link in the description as well. The question that I know is going to come up in this video probably is how I have my controllers mounted. So as you probably know, I'm running 21 controllers, but I actually have majority of them here in 2 corners of the house. So we're right here on the northeast corner, and there's the front door. On the other side of the front door is another one of these boxes. And I made these myself. It's just a pressure treated 1x material that I ended up staining, and they actually function as deck boxes, storage boxes throughout the summer. But in the I did build them specifically to use them for the controllers in the winter, and it's just a nice spot because I have so many controllers here. Instead of trying to mount each on a stand, I can put them all in this box. And you can see the way I've designed it is there's actually holes down here at the bottom where all the cords can run out, and it goes all the way around. So it's really convenient. And I just have the whole box mounted up on blocks just so it sits off the ground about 2 or 3 inches, so I can run the blocks right in. And it's been really convenient. The nice thing about it is that I do have a lock on it as well. So I can lock them up, and for whatever security reasons, so I'm ever concerned about that. And I did silicone in the top here, so it's actually a waterproof lid on top. I didn't bother with the edges. Obviously, it helps it breathe a little bit too, so in case there ever is any heat buildup, it won't stay. But to be honest with you, it's so cold here, I would never be concerned about that anyway. So that's how I made it. Again, it's just a deck box I made. You see it's just a 2x4 frame with some 1x pressure treated material. Threw a hinge on it, threw a lock on it, and that's how I have everything set up. So you can see I've got 5 controllers here. I believe on the other side I have 6, including 2 of my 5-gallon bucket 40 amp controllers, which I'll have mentioned in the video. So that's how I'm running it, and it makes it very, very convenient. And you can see here again is all the 8 outlets on this side for these controllers, along with a couple others. So again, I'll talk about it again, but I have my Megatree controllers on the pole, and then there's another controller out there on the maple tree on the very front on the other side of the sidewalk. But these boxes have been very convenient, and I do like them a lot. Alright, when it comes to managing the extension cords in the display, you'll notice that I use SPT1 wire almost exclusively. I chose SPT1 because it's cheapest compared to SPT2. You know, I can still use the Vampire plugs, and also because it's the same size as store-bought C9 wire, and even online bought C9 wire. So the Vampire plugs are all interchangeable, and you know, many Christmas decorators, I'm sure, are familiar with the Vampire plugs. Just male and female plugs that go on the ends of SPT wire as soon as you cut it. The important thing that I always do is I make sure I have my polarity correct at all times. So SPT wire usually comes with one side marked, either dots or labeled or somehow, and I always make sure that my wide prong on the male end will match up with the female end on the other end of the wire, and it's easy to do that when the wires are marked. So I have probably, you know, several miles, probably close to 5 miles almost of SPT wire, since I'm running 336 channels. But I do try and keep things centrally located. So like you'll see here on the Megatree, which I'll get to in a little bit, I have 2 controllers there. So I have actually no extension cords for the Megatree, or either Megatree. And another thing that I do to make it easier to set up every year is for my longer runs of SPT wire, I zip tie everything together. So you can see here, these are for the 10 mini trees in the front yard here, and they are all bundled together. There's 3 channels in each tree, so that's 30 cords, and I just have all bundled together. So every year all I gotta do is roll out this one big cord, and it all plugs in to these control boxes right here. A couple other tricks I've used with the SPT wire, as well as running the Cat5 wire, is how to get it underneath the sidewalk. And you'll see here at the front porch, what I've actually done is I just put in basically what is an irrigation box, but there's a piece of conduit under there where all the wires go in, and they run underneath the sidewalk to the other side here. So I just used a piece of, I believe it's 2-inch conduit, and it's big enough to run several SPT wires through with no problem. And so basically in this case I have the Cat5 that runs from this side of the house underneath the sidewalk to the other side where the other Megatree is, as well as some strobe cords and some things like that. So that's one of the tricks I use. Over here on the driveway, in order to get cords from the control box here to the wire trees I have on this side of the driveway, which I'll talk about in a little bit, I actually used a cord cover, and I'll post a link down in the description where I purchased this. And you can see here I have 5 trees plus the radio sign, and I actually have the cords just running right through here. So there's actually 16 cords running through the cord cover here. You can see them all come out there, and then the cord's zip tied again, so it all comes out in one piece every year, and then goes into the controllers. Now, since it's 16 channels, you think I could just put a control box right there and just run 2 wires underneath the driveway. But it doesn't work out that way because these wire trees pull too much power for one controller. So I actually had to spread the power over 2 controllers, which is why those 16 wires have to make it all the way back to here so I can split them on another controller that shares some other low power items. So that's what I've done right here. Something that's also pretty unique would be probably how I label all my cords. I'm sure everyone has their own different way of doing it. The way that I've done this since the first year I started 4 years ago with the controllers is that I just take all my bundles of wire and just label them where they go. So like here's that big cord that we were showing earlier that goes to the 10 mini trees on this side of the house. There's 30 cords here. And you can see I have them all zip tied, of course, so it's easy to put them away and store them and bring them back out without tangling. But then I have them zip tied separately into 3 strings, you know, one for white, one for red, one for green. And then I have the number labeled, so this is the 10th one, you know, 9, 7, 8, they're all in here. And then each label with the 10 then gets split off again. to a color-coded label. So when I grab this cord, I know this is Mini Tree 10, and here's the green electrical tape, so this is the green one. And then here, you can see the white one for 10, which is right there. And then the red one for Mini Tree 10 is right here, which goes in one of the channels there. Now, it does make it a bit time-consuming to plug in, but this way, if I ever change the setup, I can reuse all my labels. I don't have to change anything. And the way that I figure out where everything goes is with my giant spreadsheet, which I also use, which I'll probably talk about in the how I manage all the electric loads and things, but I also use a spreadsheet to figure out where things go. So you can see here's my controller 12. I know that, which is this one right here, controller 12. And I know that controller 12 plugs into the third outlet on the northeast side of the house here. So both the 1 through 8 and 9 through 16 both plug in the same outlet in this case. And then you can see here where it says these are all the mini trees. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 white. And there's the channel numbers right there. So this is kind of simple how it all lines up, but if I go to the other side of the control box, you'll see here that I ended up going to red on channel 11, so then it counts to red and it'll count through green. So I know that when I grab, for instance, right here at the bottom, the East Mini Tree red, which of course is number here, what was it, number 6. So I'll find the number 6 group of 3, and I'll find the red one, and I can just look here and say, oh, I know, right away that goes on channel 16 on controller number 12. Now, I have started to cheat this year because I've been pulling controllers so often working on Triacs that I did start to cheat, and I've ended up, labeling the channel number on the edge of the Vampire plug as well. So I still have my color-coded labeling in case I ever move my channel configuration for whatever reason, but I still have the channel number here too. So once I do get everything kind of lined up where it goes, and I have to unplug or plug stuff back in, bam, 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 real quick, I have it all set and ready to go. And this is another trick I've learned. When you get these plugs, if you get the ones completely assembled from the Lightorama, they'll have little bands on them with the channel count. Since I had the card assembled kit where you have to put the cords on yourself, you have to label the cords yourself, and I just use silver Sharpie. But at first I only labeled one side, but when you get a big mess of them like this, it's kind of hard to pull through all the cords to find the right channel number. So I labeled all 4 sides now, and this is probably the best thing I've done this year to save time, just because it's a lot easier, just to look and find that channel right away if you have to unplug something or plug something in. So that's my little secret there. When it comes to my display signage, I have a pretty good variety. You can see I have 2 of these. These are my Tune 2 signs. They're located right here in front of the display. I ordered these from Shindigz, actually. They're just vinyl banners. I got the 30-inch by 82-inch, and they come with grommets on them, and they're very strong vinyl. They're pretty nice. But I actually just made a plywood frame for mine and mounted it on 2 pieces of conduit with conduit clamps. They're pounded in the ground so it doesn't blow away, and it's very sturdy. So I just have, I don't have anything fancy, I just have floodlights shining on them. So I have one here, and then you'll see way over in the corner of the house on the other side I have one there which faces the other direction of the street. And you can see here I also added these no parking signs, which help control traffic during display hours, because I had a big problem starting my second year with people that didn't want to wait in line, so they started parking directly in front of the house here, blocking the view of everyone that wanted to park on this side of the street that were waiting in line. So the no parking signs, I made these really simple. I want to redo these this year, but it's just a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that's laminated, and I just mounted it to a T-post, a mini T-post. But it's very simple, and they've worked amazingly well to keep the front of the display here open so everyone sitting in their cars across the street can see fine. Something I also added my second year as traffic got worse were these signs for all of our neighbors that just say not to block their driveways. So I had a driveway right here, which is right across from the display, and I just had these signs made at a local sign shop, and they're just white plastic Coro. It's basically just your standard yard sign, but they had them printed with the red ink, and I actually have a floodlight shining on them, a solar light. So with everyone that has their headlights off, waiting in the display, they still have a way of seeing the sign. And you can see I have them lined up all the way down the street. And actually, since it's my house here, actually across the street, I have a okay to block here sign, because I wanted to make sure I had another another sign or another spot for people to park across the street. You know, why give up a spot across the street when it's a driveway that can be blocked anyway? So that's actually the kind of funny story, is that this is my parents' house where the display is, and you know, my house is across the street now. So I don't know if there'll ever be 2 displays in the future, but who knows? But that's the way it's running right now. The nice thing about having our light show in our neighborhood is that actually we have even more family members down the street. So here we are a block away, and this is my Tune To sign I have down here for people waiting in line over a block away, and it just says Tune To my radio station 89.9. This is actually a sign I won at a door prize from Holiday Coro. So I'm not sure how well it's going to show up in the sun here, but you can see it just says Tune To 89.9, and it's just another piece of plastic Coro, this time black, that you poke mini lights through to spell out, you know, whatever your station number is. And I had got the 3-digit one for station less than 100. So, and this again, an awesome door prize I won from them several years ago. And I'd recommend, if you want a simple sign, easy to do, you can do yourself. Just get the sign from them, the little plastic Coro. And I actually put mine in my own little display case. They make stands for them, but I made my own out of 2x4s that you can see right here. So we're about a block away from the display, and actually the line will go for another 2 blocks behind me at sometimes, but at least when you get inside the display from here, you have a radio sign that tells you where to tune to. These are my maple trees with the big trunk wraps on them. You can see all of the lights I have on them, and my first year I did this, I only used clear on the maple trunks. So I just wrapped them around the standard way you do a trunk wrap. However, since adding the red and green and so many wires, I wanted to come up with an easier way to re-wrap them every year that didn't take so much time. So the way that I decided to go about that was to use plastic hardware cloth, you can see here, to make my own net lights. So all I've done here is I took 3-foot wide strips of hardware cloth that you can buy at your big box lumber yard. Here in the Midwest, I got mine from Menards. And I just used 3 runs, so I have a 3-foot section here, 3 foot here, another 3 foot, and in the last section, since I wanted 10 foot tall, I ripped one of the 3-foot wide rolls into 1 foot, and I just made another 1-foot section at the top. So I just attached my lights with zip ties, about every foot or so, and I just made 1 row all the way down, and then you can see, just looped it around, did a U-turn, and then I went all the way back to the other end and looped it again. And it just went every segment here, you can just see, I just butt them right up against each other, and you can't even see the seam when they're all lit up. So you can see how thick they are with all the lights on them. But the hardware cloth works out great. It's hardware cloth is basically chicken wire. It's like a square chicken wire, only it's made of plastic. So there's no problem with GFCI trips, at least from the cloth. These still trip on their own because there's so many lights wrapped around the tree bark. But there's no chicken wire involved to make that worse. And what I did was, in the middle here was fine because the tree was nice and straight, but at the top and the bottom where it flares out, I had to come up with a way to allow the hardware cloth to wrap around the tree without getting bent or warped or wanting to come off the trunk. So the way I went about that was to cut slits in the hardware cloth, as you can see right here. And the way I did this was, before I put the lights on, I pre-fitted the hardware cloth and cut the slits where I needed it to stretch around the flares of the tree. So you can see I have a couple on here, and I tied a rope to the base of the hardware cloth at the time, just zip tied it, and I stretched it out so I knew that when I took this back to the shop I could stretch the bottom out as far as the rope allowed me to, and that was how far I needed to keep this apart when I zip tied the lights on. So you can see here I have about a 6-inch gap at the bottom, and I just put zip ties on each side of the slit that I cut, which keep it all tied together really strong. And then when I roll these up, these just crunch back together and just roll up like a normal roll of net lights. The bark of the tree itself holds them pretty secure, but to help me, since I'm usually a one-man show, to help me get the lights around, the nets around the tree without them falling off, you can see I kind of cheated. I just tack in a couple roofing nails every so often, which helps hold the cloth on the tree while I wrap it around. And you can see when I secure it, I just used extra large zip ties through some of the Shindigz lights there to hold it on. The hardware cloth will snap if you put too much stress on it, which is why I put the big zip ties around the strings as well. And you can see here on the back where all the cords run up the back of the tree. Since these trees started out as white only on just the trunks my first year of the display, all of the white is still plugged into the old lines that come from actually my spare megatree channels, which I'll mention when I get to the megatrees. So each one of the megatrees has 8 SPT1 cords that run from the yard over to the trunks. So what I was able to do my first year is make the white pulsate up and down, having channels 1 through 8 lined up in segments of the trunk. So like on a bass beat or something like that, I can have them move up and down like pistons. So I had independent control on both tree trunks. And then 2 years ago I wanted to add red and green to these, so I had to add another controller up here to save on extension cords. I just put a controller here on the side of the tree, just put a screw through the back of the controller into the tree. It works out fine for holding it. Then obviously I have a trash bag on everything to help hide it and add waterproofing. So this controller here just has 2 14 gauge wires that run all the way from the outlets at the house and plug into the controller here. So this controller has 8 lines that run from this spot over to that tree, and then another smaller cord that runs over to this side. And I did that because I have 2 channels, 1 for each color on red and green on the trunks, as well as 2 years ago when I added the red and green in the trunks, I added the big lights that go all the way up to the tops of the trees. I mean, they're just mini lights, but they're I used 6 strings to make them. They're 2 long of each color, so there's actually about 50 feet worth of lights that goes from the top of the trunk here all the way up as far as I can reach to the top of the branches. And the way that I got those lights to the tops of the branches is with a simple 16-inch softball tied to a 1/8 inch poly rope. So I throw the ball over the tree and the rope goes with it, and then when the ball falls down, it brings the end of the rope down with it. So I just tie the lights off to the rope and then winch them all the way up to the top just by pulling on in the rope. So then I tie all the ropes off. You can see here, if I zoom in, you might be able to see the metal hook there that they're all tied to, and then I just zip tie the extra to the ropes that go up to the tops of the tree. So when it's time to take all these lights down, I just unhook them from the hook, and then the tops just kind of slide all the way down, and then I unhook the zip ties around the top there where they're tied off to the top net. And it takes a long time and maybe a little bit of a sore arm after 3 days of throwing a softball really high in the tree. But it's actually the method that's worked out pretty well for me so far. It's a little time consuming, it takes several days, but it doesn't cost me anything, which is nice. And it gives a really cool effect because several of the strings go way high and it feels like you're part of the display when you're sitting underneath them on the road to watch. Also in these trees I have what are called either snowfall lights or blizzard tubes or you know, falling icicle lights, whatever you want to call them. I have them in these trees. They just have a dripping effect when I turn them on. This is one of the very few LED items that I have in the display, because these are LEDs, and they show like a dripping effect of icicles when I turn them on. And the snowfall tubes that I chose were LED low voltage ones. You can see the transformer right here for this tree, and I have 5 24-inch and 5 12-inch in each tree, which is just enough to wrap all the way around the canopy of the tree once. I've actually bought more for next year so I can go twice around and add more lights to it, but it's worked out great this year. It's a nice effect to have during some of the songs as well. The reason why I went with the low voltage ones is because the connections you can see here are very strong and they seal up really well, because these get a lot of abuse when I put them in the tree. I didn't any retrofit like C9 socket type ones would fail on me getting roughed around the branches when I put them up. I use a 30-foot fiberglass extension pole to put these up, and if I had done that with a retrofit, all the C9 retrofit sockets would likely break right off the SPT wire because they get wrestled around the branches quite a bit. So I have one channel controlling both trees. So this tree here actually has, there's the transformer right there, then I have just an SPT wire that runs from there all the way back to the corner of the house there, and there's another wire that comes out of that same channel that goes to this tree, so they come on at the same time. Okay, unlike the maple trees out front, which I showed you my cool net lighting trick, I do have what I guess you would call the old school way of wrapping trunks on this backyard tree here, which is also part of the display. This tree was part of the display many years ago when I first started just doing regular lights without the animation, and we've always wanted to keep it as kind of, you know, just a symbolic thing to have in the display. And it works out really well too, because you can see this tree really well from the front yard if you're out in the right angle, so it's definitely an integral part. This tree is actually here way on the back of the house, so it's quite a ways away from most of the other things in the display. So I do have a Cat5 run actually that comes from way over here on the corner of the house, where I have a couple controllers that control up to the roof and the tree line there on the side. And so that Cat5 runs all the way down the yard here to this tree, and I think you can see it right there. This is my 5-gallon bucket 40 amp controller hiding under the garbage bag there to keep the water off of it and all the connections. So I do have one long Cat5 run, and again, this is, like I said, one of the 3 dead end locations I have. This tree, it pulls, I think it's got to be, I think it's 12 amps on each color. So it's a real big power sucker. In fact, it might even be over 15. I'll have to look up my list to remember, because it has so many lights on it. It's got, I believe it's 6,000 lights of each color, so 18,000 total. And you can see, like I said, the old school way of wrapping lights. I just make my super string bundle. I didn't use the fancy twisting way on these, which I'll post in a later video, or a later link to one of my videos. I just kind of twisted these the old way, or just kind of grab 3 strings at once and ball them up. But you can see it's just the 3 colors together wrapped around, and I do them pretty tight. You know, my spacing is probably only about 3 inches apart on these, and it makes it look a pretty full look. I believe I have 3 channels used for each color to balance out my amp load so I don't overload any channels. Something else that I do on this tree, because I have so many lights on it, is I can't plug so many end to end. A lot of people are probably familiar with the rules of 3 with mini lights, where you can't plug more than 3 strings end to end. Well, the rule of 3 is actually more like a rule of 8, because the fuses in the plugs are 3 amp fuses, and if you consider a mini light string to have or use about 0.3 amps per string, you could actually technically go up to 9, but just for safety I limited it at 8 strings end to end. And I've done it this way for a long time. You know, you can plug 8 in and end, and you probably more than likely will never have a fuse problem. I have yet to have a fuse problem doing that. So just remember that the rule of 3 is actually more like a rule of 8 if you really need to get by the rules of 3. And even then, if you go by a rule of 8, plugging 8 strings end to end still only gets me so far up the tree. So what I have to do is I have to run some extension cords up to, you know, different junctions on the branches. So you can see right here, there's one of the ends right there. So I have 3 cords, 1 for each color, running all the way up the side of the tree. And those cords will branch off to some of the upper branches. And the neat part about this tree is after I do the tree wrap, or actually before I do the tree wrap, I hang lights vertically from the highest up branches, and then whenever they hit a main trunk, I just start wrapping from there. So it makes the tree taller and makes it look more like a tree rather than just having to wrap the thick trunks. You also get some you know, thinner branches that head up vertically. So I really like the effect, and you'll see the tree in the backyard of the display in some of the display videos that I have posted. And I guess I'll also mention that I did use my 30-foot telescoping pole that I mentioned for the maple trees out front of the house for the blizzard tubes. I also did use these. That's how I reach up to the top of the tree there. It's not too bad. It's only about 20-25 feet high. Also here in the backyard, in addition to the magnolia tree that I just showed you with all the wrapped lights around it, I do have the garage as part of the display. At least I lighted this side and the north side of the garage because you can see it from the street. And here, you know, I did just like I'll show you on the house later. I did the roof and the gutters the same way as the house, along with the icicle lights, which I'll get to in a bit. But for the garage, again, since I'm dealing with C9s, so I have so many amps in play, you know, well over, you know, about 4 amps for the gutter, and then another 4 amps on each color for the roof. In fact, probably almost 5 amps. I have to run cords to different locations to balance out my controller. So the garage here, the top roof of the garage actually runs 3 cords, and this is one of the few places I use 16 gauge to limit my voltage drop. So, you know, if I have 5 amps up there on the roof, if I run 18 gauge SPT1, I get a little more voltage drop over a 100-foot run. Whereas here, you know, I use the controller here on the corner of the house, back there where the tree line is. So I run 16 gauge all the way down the yard here. And you can see another important thing, which I've talked about, is elevating connections for GFCI protection, so they don't trip. So I got all my connections elevated, and then of course the 16 gauge runs up here. So that's one of the few places that I do use 16 gauge is areas of long runs to prevent too much voltage drop and resistance in the wire, and to cheese up the wire. So then the bottom here of the garage, the icicle lights and the C9 gutter lights, I have just enough room left on this 140 amp controller here, just enough amp capacity where I can run those cords over across the garden here to that controller. So this controller is probably my most loaded controller. It probably pulls, you know, close to 18 amps on each side when the tree and the garage both kick on at the same time, but it's been running fine. No Triac problems on anything. My 40 amp controllers are the most reliable controllers I have, more so than the PC controllers, unfortunately. Also forgot to mention that I do have the garage window as well, which you'll see the window frame there, which will be coming up here in another segment of the video. And I guess that's another 3 channels that run over to the magnolia tree controller as well. So that controller has been doing a lot of work for me in this display. Next on my list to show are my C9 lights. These all go around the sidewalks along the ground. I call them my stake lights because they're held up on stakes as well. And it's just 3 separate runs of each color, one for white, one for red, and one for green. So on this section here, I actually have 4 strings plugged end to end that start from the corner of the house there and go all the way around this grass section up to the front door. And then I have 3 strings in a row from the front door over the corner there where the fence is, and then I have another 3 strings along the fence along the property line. So these pull quite a few number of amps. Like my biggest one here would be my 4 in a row here, which pushes between 5 and 6 amps when it's on, full on, and that's per color. So very seldom do I ever, I think on these I almost basically never turn all colors on because I think that will overload my controllers, which is why I don't do it. But these are very bright and they really light up the yard great, and they work great on bass beats in my sequencing. The bass beats line up really well with ground elements. These C9 lights are, you can see, just held on by their clips to pieces of 8-foot long 1x stock, 3/4 inches, and I just ripped pieces on the table saw down to about 3/16 of an inch thick. I could probably go to a 1/4 inch and still be fine, and it'd be even stronger than what I have here. But you can see all I did was I ripped these and I primed, like everything I paint in my display, it's primed dark gray first with oil primer and then painted with exterior black paint. And you can see by doing this, I don't have to use stakes for every bulb. So you can see I had one stake bulb here where you can see the clip broke off, so I had to put a stake on it this year, but I only have a stake about every foot down the whole line here, which saves a lot of time and effort on these lights. And the way that I keep them attached is by zip ties. And here's a zip tie there. There's another zip tie there. By zip ties about every foot. I think sometimes I put them on more often than that. And those just keep them from sliding off the boards when I put them in storage and move them around every year. And what's really interesting about how I did these is because these are 8 feet long, the string length on 12-inch space C9s is 24 feet as well, if you count from the first bulb to the last bulb in between. But obviously, since I have 3 colors, that ends up being a 25-foot spacing. So what I did was I cut 1 foot off, so that way every 3 boards is 1 string of C9. So that way 3 of these boards will come off and I can unplug them. Instead of having, what is probably a total of 8 or 9 boards here, I can plug them off, or I unplug them in sets of 3 and just fold them up like an accordion. And the other neat part too is that around the curve of the sidewalk here, I actually just cut my strips a little bit thinner down to less than 1/8 of an inch, and they were able just to bend around the curve of the sidewalk, which I thought was a really neat effect and pretty clever. But again, these are the best way to do this probably when you have this many lights. If I just had white only, I could probably get away with a stake on each bulb, but when you triple the number of bulbs, it gets pretty insane. And you can see it works pretty well. It takes a little bit of time to get them lined up nice and straight, but you can see they're pretty straight there. So that's how I'm running all my C9 lights. Something else I wanted to mention about the ground lights, and I'll post a picture of it here on the video, are what's called lawn lights that I've used at our church location, where I do a little bit of a display there that's just a static, always on, no synchronization to it. And I'll post a link to those in the description as well, where you can purchase those. I think they're still available. But they're a really neat effect. It's just a 50 count string of mini lights, but there's only a bulb every 10 feet. And when you spread them out in the lawn and put them on stakes, it's a really neat effect. So you can see in that picture that I'll post what that looks like. So I don't use those in my display here. Not quite enough room for those, but if you have a large lot, they look really neat, and I would definitely use them if I did have a larger lot here. Something else to keep in mind when working with C9s is how many strings you can plug into each other. You can see here at the beginning of my C9 stake light run here, I have used SPT 1 wire vampire plugs to go right on the ends of the wire in replacement of the factory plugs. That's because this run of stake lights here uses 4 strands of C9 lights, which is the equivalent of about 5 to 6 amps of power. Well, the fuses in the factory C9 plugs that you buy the 25 counts from the store only have 5 amp fuses, so I would risk blowing that fuse every time I turn these on. So to get around that fuse, all I did was I put a vampire plug on the first string, since the first string will be the only one having the 5+ amps moving through it, whereas everything else is going to have 4.5 or less, so I don't have to worry about them quite so much. So that's the way that I get around the fuses, and you can plug as many as 4 C9 strings of 25 count end to end, no problem, as long as you remove that first fuse in the first string. And I just did that using vampire plugs. Here are my mini trees. These mini trees are 24 inches tall. I don't remember how wide they are exactly, but what's unique about these is that they are crab pot trees. And I'll post a link in the description of the video where I purchased these. These are actually made from, you can see through the bulbs there, it's basically a hexagonal chicken wire, only it's a little bit heavier gauge, and it's also coated in vinyl. So you don't have the problems you have with GFCI trips like you do with normal chicken wire elements or tomato cages, because everything's coated in vinyl. And the other nice thing too is that I like the shape of these trees a little bit better versus a tomato cage tree, because they're a little bit wider at the base, you know, for how tall they are. So they give a little more of a triangle shape, which I really like. So I ordered these crab pot trees without the lights. You have to call and special order them. I don't know if they're still available that way or not, but the way they're made is to fold up on themselves into triangles for storage when you're done, if you get them with the lights. The problem is I have so many lights on these. There's 200 of each color, 2 strands of each, so there's 600 lights, that they filled up so much that instead of trying to bother getting all of the lights zip tied on and being able to fold them back up, I just wrapped them around as they are, so these just get stored the same way they're standing up now. And you can see it's really easy to wrap the lights because all of the chicken wire has little prongs, you can see right there sticking out, and then see 2 more right there sticking out, where they cut them to make the triangles that all get fastened in the middle right there with a metal band. So because of that, you don't really need any zip ties when you wrap the lights around. I just wrap the lights around fairly tautly, not too much where you bend the trees up though, and it just holds itself. I did put a few zip ties along the last row just to keep the last row from falling off, and this one doesn't have it, but on most of them I did put a zip tie on the top as well. But They work excellent, and I love the look of these. They have multiple sizes. I got the 24-inch. I believe they go up to 20 or 48-inch, and maybe there is even a 72-inch, a 6'1". But they are pretty expensive, especially with the lights. But I would definitely order these again for another display if I ever did one, because it's just a great product. You can see I kind of snaked them through the yard here to make a cool effect, and I make them chase a lot in a lot of the songs. So when you're standing off, you're not directly in front of the house, but off to the side, you can still kind of see the snake effect, which is kind of neat. So I have 15 of these, and you can see how I ran all the cords. I believe I already showed the east side of the house here. Here's the west side, and I just took, since there's 3 colors on each, everything's got 3 channels, so there's 15 channels for these 5 here on this side of the sidewalk. So there's 15 SBT1 cords that all get bundled up and zip tied into one main cord, which goes just right here along the driveway all the way back to where the control boxes are. And then of course the other one's got 10 trees on the other side, so over there's 30 cords that run back. And by zip tying everything together, and just, you can see where my plugs plug in right here. So every tree you go by, you get 3 less cords until you get to the very last tree in the line here. Now I just have the 3 here. Something else I'll probably do next year is I'll go ahead and prop these up on stakes, all my connections, to keep the GFCI trips from happening. These trees only tripped twice this year, in about the 5 times we had rain, which isn't too bad. My maple trunks trip a lot more often than that. So the crab pot vinyl wrapped netting helped a lot, I believe, with the GFCI trips. And maybe I wouldn't even have any trips if I had raised my connections, but we'll see about that next year when I do that. Next up is my tree line, my very, very long tree line, made up of 24 6.5-foot tall pre-lit Christmas trees from Walmart. When I bought these, they were type N trees. I believe they've since relabeled all of their items a different way, but these are all 6.5-foot tall. I believe 3 or 3.5 foot wide is what they're advertised, and they're just your standard indoor pre-lit tree. I got these 75% off. Almost all of them were 75% off over the last 2 years I purchased them, which ends up being about $10 to $12 a tree, which is a heck of a deal when you think about, you're actually buying a full pre-lit tree. So these were pre-lit with 400 clear lights, and of course I added 400 more of my 3 colors, clear, red, and green. So they have 400 red, 400 green, and 800 clear. So the clear is especially bright when it comes on, and that was kind of the effect that I was going for on these trees. So because there's 24 trees and I have 3 channels in each tree, I'm eating up 72 channels on just my tree line alone. But because my tree line spans almost the entire width of the display, at least here in front of the house, I do almost all of my fades and chases across the display based on locations of the tree line. So all I have to do is set up a chase across my 24 trees on the tree line if I say I want to fade from left to right. And then I line every other item based off of what tree they line up with. So for instance, on my mega tree here, you can see my mega tree lines up with about the 5th and 6th tree right here. So when I do a fade across the house, I know that when trees 5 and 6 fade, that's about the time I want my mega tree to fade as well. And because my mega tree spans about 4 trees here, I'll make that fade just a little bit longer in duration as well. And that's how it matches really well. And I'll do the same thing with my windows here too. So you can see the window lines up with about tree number 2 on this side. So I'll tell the window to fade at the same time tree 2 does, as well as the upstairs window if I'm doing left to right or right to left. And it's a really neat trick I've learned to make everything fade real easy across the display to get all your timing marks set up right. So that's the little secret that I use to do sequencing with my tree line. The other unique thing about my tree line is how they're all standing up. Unlike some other trees which have bases, these did come with little plastic bases, but because it gets so windy here in winter, what I ended up doing, if I can try and show you underneath here, is I just took the base of the tree and I slipped it over, if I can lift it up here, see a piece of a 1/2-inch EMT conduit. So there's just a conduit pounded probably about 16 inches into the ground, along with another 2 foot that goes out of the ground that the tree slides over, and the diameter ended up being perfect for this. And the first year I learned that even though the tree sat over conduit, it still wanted to sink into the mud before the ground was frozen. So I actually just put a little set screw on each little piece of conduit right at the ground level when it gets pounded in. So that keeps the tree from sliding all the way into the ground, and it just sits at the surface. So that set screw helped out a lot. While I'm on the trees as well, I should probably mention my strobe lights. Now my strobe lights here, you can see I use I-flash incandescent strobes. I always use incandescent strobes. The LED ones don't give you as nice of a flash. Most of my strobes were purchased from CDI. I'll post the link to them down in the description of this video, as well as other sources I've ordered from. I just ordered some I-flash strobes, which are a little bit brighter flash than the I-flash, from another vendor this year, and I'll post that link in the description as well. That I'm going to try out next year and see how they work. But strobes have been a great addition since I added them the first year. I'm now up to about 150 strobes in the display, and a lot of them are on the tree line here. And then I have some on the roof, which we'll see later when we get on the house. And then I also have strobes, I think I might have mentioned before, up high in the maple trees, along with the lights that go up high there. So all my strobes are just run on, again, SPT 1 wire with the little clip-on C9 sockets. These are just, retrofit strobes that go right through into the C9 socket. And something I try and do, I really don't know if it matters incredibly much, but I always try and keep my strobes pointed down or sideways, never pointed up. And that keeps any water that may condensate on the inside of it from not getting into the little circuit board, which is up in the base of the strobe. Instead, it will all settle down at the bottom. Some people have drilled holes in them. I will never do that, because I think that'll just allow more opportunity for water to get in. But I just try and keep pointing them down. Like I said, I really don't think it matters too much. I probably lose, out of the 150 strobes I've been using the last couple of years, I probably lose about 5 or 6 every year to failure, which I think is pretty standard, I've heard. And then I guess I also have strobes along the my C9 lights here along the ground. You can see I just raised them up on stakes like right here. So when we do get snow, the C9s will melt through the snow really nicely, make a nice glow, but the strobes don't. So I had to raise them up above the snow when we do get some. And the C9s on the ground and on the trees in the house are all one channel. I think I have over 100 strobes plugged in at one channel, and last I checked it, it's only pulling like 2.5 amps. So with an 8 amp channel limit, you can plug a lot of strobes into one channel and not have too many worries. So my strobes up in these trees are all on their own channel because the trees aren't always on in some of the songs, so I want to have those separately controlled. I guess I should mention too that I'm using strobes that flash about once per second. That's something else to watch out for, is how many seconds or how many flashes per second you have on your strobes that you buy. Some of the cheaper strobes might only flash once every couple seconds, and usually the more they flash, the more expensive they are. So I think the strobes I'm using here in my display flash about once per second, and then I believe the I-flashes I ordered for next year are even faster than that, maybe. So these are about $4.50 on a pre-order sale, I believe. So they're pretty expensive, but you don't need too many to get a nice effect. And after a few years, you do start to accumulate them. Next, I want to show you the wire trees that we have in our display. Just over on the other side of the driveway here, I've already showed how I run the cords over to it underneath my cord cover. These trees have always been part of the old static display. We've had them for probably close to 10 years already, and they've actually held up fairly well, being just a bunch of painted metal. They were all incandescent clear, and when I went to animation the first year, I didn't have enough red or green to cover them, so they were just clear that year. But then starting my second year and now into my fourth year, they are covered with red and green lights. You can see that it's all white wire, so the nice thing about these trees is that they really glow bright when you light them up, because all of the white wire reflects the light back from the bulbs. So you can see, I just the branches used to have little ends that came out to make them look more full, but because I started wrapping them, I closed all the branches in, so now you just see the main branches sticking out. And you can see I just wrapped the lights right around them. The red bulbs on white wire I got from Walmart a few years ago, back when you could still find some incandescent white wire colored bulbs. And the green I never was able to find, so I special ordered from a site online. I really like wire trees. If I could find them and find white wire lights, I'd use more of them. But I couldn't, obviously, so that's why I resorted to the green artificial trees for the tree line. But these will always be part of the display. I hope to keep them running for many more years because it's a nice effect. These kind of do their own thing during parts of the songs. Because they're kind of their own specialty item in the display, so I treat them a little bit different than I do the rest of my tree line. Unlike my tree line, the way that these are anchored is with, I kept their large bases, and they actually came with, when purchased, just some metal stakes that go through the ends of the leg here. Zoom out here, you can see the end of the leg. There's just a metal stake that goes right over them that you can't see. They're buried in the grass, so it holds up really well, and they don't blow much at all, especially when the ground freezes. I never had these problem with these blowing over after they're staked in. Here are my mega trees. My mega trees are a bit unique because I put them right up against the front of the house here, so I can have them behind my tree line, but still in front of the house. Because the way I've done my display is I layer everything smallest in front, and then it keeps getting bigger until it gets up to the house. So I have two mega trees. These mega trees are 96 strings each, 32 of each one of my three colors, red, green, and clear. And the way that I have done these in the past, until this year, was I did 32 strings of each color and I had them all separated. So each one had its own separate hook at the top, and then they all came down here and I zip tied each one individually to the ring. That took forever, and this was always a big time waster putting up all these strands, since I do have two mega trees that are both identical. So this year I made super strings by twisting three colors together on my mega tree. And these super strings were able to cut the time it took me to put these up, by easily by 2/3. So it takes me 1/3 the time now, because I only have to put on really 32 strings on each tree. And I made a really cool video of how I've made these super strings, unlike some other people have probably made them. And I'll post the link here on this video so you can go watch that, and also put it in the description. So pretty unique way of how I've made my super strings. I recommend anyone who does mega trees with multiple colors, super strings are a great effect. I know some people, including myself, originally wanted to keep my strings separated here because I thought it made the tree look fuller, but in all honesty at nighttime you really can't tell at all, so it doesn't really make too much of a difference. Both of my mega trees are 17 feet from where the pole meets the ground to the top where the lights end. And then I have another approximately 2-foot section where the tree topper attaches to what is a 1/2-inch gas pipe. The mega pole itself is a 1 1/4-inch gas pipe, and I used two 10-foot sections, so I had to put a, you can see right there in the middle, a coupling there at the 7-foot height. So the 10-foot piece is on the top and the 7-foot piece is on the bottom. And that allows me to, since I have everything on a pulley, lower the pulley, which slides along the pipe down here to this coupling. And I'll share pictures of my mega tree setup close up so you can see, but my hook head there is just a 2x4 PVC reducer with screws attached to it. And then each one of my mega strings has a washer zip tied to it. I got that idea from Richard Holman my first year I did my display in 2011, and it works as a great setup to hook everything up real quickly. So the washer just stays zip tied to it all year, and then when I put it in storage as well. And so there's two pulleys up there on a flange, which just a pipe flange with screws to the top of my 1 1/4-inch pipe. And I have two pulleys there, plus it's also where my guy wires attach. And then you can see my two ropes come down to, I have a little tie off right here, a couple feet off the ground, and that's where they tie off to, just like a flagpole. So this works really well for being able to put the lights on here at arm's length at 7 feet and then raise it up to the top. My guy wires are just 1/8 inch steel cable. You can see them right here. And I used turnbuckles at the bottom so I can tighten and adjust them as needed. And then they just go through some holes in the coupling at the top. And I use 1/8 inch steel cable because it's strong, but it still kind of disappears at nighttime too. I even did attempt to spray paint them black, but in all honesty, I don't even think I had to do that because they're so thin that they disappear. The way these are anchored into the ground is you can probably barely see the top edge of it there, but I used 24 inch. It's not really like a dog chain anchor that you might see at some of those stores. It's actually a mobile home anchor that's got a wide auger on the bottom. I'll post a picture of what they look like on this video as well so you can see. And those auger stakes stay in year round because I just have them barely poking out here. You can see above the grass, so they stay in year round. And I just have a clip here that goes through there and attaches to it. So that's how they anchor, and I just pull everything down and store it away all in one big piece so I don't have to take apart my coupling every year in the middle. The coupling has worked fine for me. I don't have any middle guys on here, and it holds up fine. I know there is a vendor out there that makes a coupling that goes on the inside of the pipe very tight, which keeps it from possibly bending and breaking if you use a normal coupling. I've never found that I've needed that. The regular coupling you can buy at the store works fine in my scenario. A couple of things that are probably abnormal that I do is I only use 3 guy wires. I know many people use 4, but in all honesty, you're basically building a radio tower, so you only need 3 guy wires in order for the principle to work, in order to balance it out, pulling on each end. So a nice thing about the steel guy wires too is that you can get them really tight to make it very sturdy. So I only use 3 guy wires, and it makes it easy for adjusting left and right and so on, so I can get the pull straight every year. And the other thing that is probably very unique and a big pet peeve of mine that I always see on the forums is that I don't use any holes, I don't dig any holes, I don't use any sleeves, I don't use any concrete or anything like that. And you can't see because I have garbage bags over all my controllers where all the lights plug in, but I'll post a picture here and you can see that the pole I have just sits right on top of about a 2x3 that I just notched a little hole into so the pipe doesn't slide off of it, and it just sits right on the ground. So my pole just sits on the ground and it holds itself up because the only force acting on my pole is gravity at the base. There's no left or right forces, so it's not going anywhere, regardless of how hard the wind blows. All my left and right strength, it happens at the top because that's where the light's attached. So that's where my force from the wind is at. And it works out easy this way because as long as you have just one helper, to hold your pole while you put on your guy wires, it's easily done in just a couple minutes. The only reason I could see using a sleeve is if you didn't have any helpers and you had to slide the pipe into the sleeve in order to hold it up while you attach the guys yourself. But since I do have a helper, and if anyone does have a helper, why waste your time digging a big hole or even using concrete for that matter when you don't have to? Because the principle behind it just doesn't make any sense to me. So this is how I've been running it for 4 years now, and it works out great. My mega toppers on these trees are 24-inch rope light snowflakes, and the previous 3 years since I started with the animation and added the mega trees, I used incandescent rope light snowflakes that worked great. Actually this year though, my rope light snowflakes finally failed on me, so I had to get some pretty quickly while I was setting up the display, and the only ones I could manage in a couple days were LED rope light snowflakes. So even though I say all incandescent, I had to fib a little bit because I actually do have 2 LED rope light snowflakes, and those are the only LED lights in the display besides my snowfall tubes that are in the trees there. So they work out okay because the LEDs do have a little bit of a different dimming curve than incandescents, but because they are the tree toppers, the effect of them taking a little longer to fade off still looks okay. And these I bought these that were full wave, and I'll post the vendor down below where I bought them from. I also bought many other things from as well. And they worked great. There's many different sizes. The 24-inch works great for my 17-foot trees. The proportion, I think, works out pretty good. So they fade really well because they're full wave, no snubbers or anything like that. You'll notice what else is unique is that the wire that runs to my topper, because I don't use any holes or concrete, all I had to do was cut a slit in the base of the pole that sits on my little 2x3 to keep it from sinking in the mud, and I can run an SPT1 wire through that slit in the pole, through the middle of the pole. Also, because I don't use a coupling inside the pole, I just use a normal standard threaded coupling, which you couldn't do if you'd gotten the one from Christmas Light Show that has the solid coupling in it to make it stronger. I can keep running it all the way up to the top to my snowflake. So that's at the very top, the wire for the snowflake actually runs down through the flange and connects to that SPT1 wire, and it runs all the way down through the base of the pole, and then back to my control box over here in the corner. So it's a great ability to run that wire through there, because it saves trying to have it run down the side where I have the pulley and everything set up. Here's a great view from above the first floor of the house here of one of the mega trees from above. So you can see my base ring here, and the lights come all the way up. And then here's what you can see really well now are how my lights attach to the top. You can see some of the washers there. I have washers on each individual string still, so some of the washers I didn't need on my super strings. And you can see where the pulleys are right there on the mega tree. So the pulley's attached to the PVC reducer coupling there that all the screws are into, that the washers hang on. And those pulleys run right back down through the PVC reducer and along the poles to my fastener at the bottom. And then also here you can see the wire for the tree topper, my snowflake, going right down through the middle of the pole. And you can see my 1/2 inch gas pipe with the snowflake is zip tied to. And you can see how I just have 2 screws to reach into the gas pipe at the top there to keep it from sliding all the way through into the pole. And then I have some wire tied around to it to keep the snowflake facing forward. And you can see really well there where the guy wires come through the holes in the flange, and then how I have my pulleys attached there too. So it's been a great setup. It's worked really well, and you can see a good view of it up here. So because I have pulleys on it, I'm not able to pull my top of my lights all the way up to the top, because the guy wires get in the way a little bit as well. But you really can't tell much, and my tree topper is still pretty close to the top of the tree, so it's not like I have a very big gap there either. For a 17-foot high pole, and I would say even going up to a 20-foot high pole, the ring on my mega tree is 32 feet in circumference, which works out great for my 32 strings, or my 32 super strings, because that just means 1 string per foot, so it's easy to measure off and plan out where everything's going. And I would say a 32-foot circumference would work fine all the way up to a 20-foot pole as well, without losing your tree shape too much, because I don't like mega trees that are too narrow or cylindrical. I like them a little bit wider than probably some people do them. So my base ring is just a 1-inch conduit, PVC conduit, which is just bent into a circle. And again, so it's 32 feet, so I use 3 pieces plus a small little piece in addition to that to make 32 feet. And it ends up making my diameter at the base just over 10 feet. And in the past, I've always just ran my base ring all the way straight to the ground, and I tied it off to the ground using small anchors, small stakes, so that way when the wind blows, it wouldn't pull the base off the ground. And that worked great for me, and it was always easy to work with. But I've had horrible rabbit problems ever since the first year I did mega trees. So what I did this year to try and avoid my rabbit problem with rabbits chewing all of the cords there where they all plug in around my controllers is I built this base ring, or base octagon, which is just 18 inches high, made out of 2x stock that I've ripped. You can see down right over here. I just kind of ripped it all in half. So it's all about 1.5 by 1.5 inches. And I just made 8 panels for each tree. So I did the same thing for the tree over there on the other side there. And so I have 16 of these panels, and they're just 18 inches tall by 48 inches wide. You can see here's the piece right here. But in order to make the octagon wide enough for the just over 10-foot diameter, I added these little 1.5-inch spacers in between each segment, which ended up being perfect. So now my ring fits perfectly on the inside of the octagon, because if I didn't use these little 1.5-inch spacers here in between, some of my ring would overhang on the outside. And you can see all I did to clip the ring on is I just used some EMT conduit clamps with a little screw on top, so the ring just slips right off when I store everything away, and all these segments just kind of screw apart, so they all store away separately. And it's worked out great. It solved my rabbit problem completely. So you can see where it's level ground, I just stack them up and screw them together. But in this case, I did have some unlevel areas, so I had some spare hardware cloth, kind of like chicken wire, that I just put along the edges, and then laid some extra landscape blocks on top to keep the rabbits from digging underneath of it, and that sealed up my little gaps where the ground was uneven. So this base has worked great, and it doesn't require me to put stakes in the ground anymore because the weight of this base octagon just holds the base ring down for me. And I try and get my lights pretty tight too, so I don't have too much sag on top of that. So it was a great idea I had this year to try and solve my rabbit problem. I didn't think it was going to work out as well as it did, but I'm very impressed with it. And you can see, in addition, since we don't have any landscaping here anymore, I just went ahead and laid black plastic down to keep the mud out. And then all of the lights, just kind of I have some stakes holding up the lights off the plastic to try and prevent GFCI trips, and it's actually worked out pretty well. You can see I also had to cut a hole for the downspout right here through my little ring so I can run that through to get the water off the roof. But so this is my base ring, and that's how I've got everything attached. You can see I just put zip ties on everything here, and you can see I also number. These are the old numbers before I started making super strings, but you can see the numbers just line up right in the middle of each segment. So that's how I line everything up. Like all of my wood elements in the display, my Mega Base Octagon was made just using regular plywood and then primed gray with oil primer and then painted black with house paint. I didn't use any spray paint because it doesn't hold up as well as house paint does. So I used flat black here so it wouldn't reflect light either. My channel configuration on both of my mega trees is identical, and I got the channel configuration idea from Richard Holdman my first year. I did the display in 2011, and it's stayed the same ever since. The way that channel configuration is set up is, since I have 32 strings of each color, I do 2 slices of pie on each end basically. So on this tree I have these 2 strings right here, which are on the same plug right here, and then the 2 directly across from it plug into the same plug. So I have 4 strings on each plug, or each channel on the controller. So I have 1 string for clear, and then 1 for red, and then 1 for green. So when I turn that 1 channel on, then this 1 slice 180 degrees apart from each other turns on. So I can still make the tree spin, but instead of having control over each individual segment, it's just a mirror image, so I have 180 degree control. And it saves on having too many channels wasted on mega trees, but it still allows you to make the spinning effect when you're trying to sequence mega trees. And so because I have 32 strands of lights on each one and 4 strands per segment, it ends up being 8 channels for each color. So I have 8 clear, 8 red, and then 8 green. So whenever I do a sequence that I want to make the mega tree spin, I just set up a chase on channels 1 through 8 for whatever color, and it makes a real easy spinning effect. So that's 2 controllers plugged in to the middle here, and you can see I just run all of my lights directly to the controllers. So only just really about 2/3 of the light string is actually seen on the tree. All of the other part of the string just runs down here to plug in the controller. So my strand length here is they all vary between 23 and 24 feet. So with just over 17 feet used for the actual part of the tree, that leaves me with well over 6-7 feet to run back into the controller. So I have plenty of slack to work with. And elevating the base ring a little bit helped give me a little extra slack as well to make that work. So I just plug all of my lights directly into the channels on the controller. So you can see I have these covered up with garbage bags to keep the rain off of them. And you can see everything here is just plugged directly into the channels. So you can see there's my 4 plugs right there going in each one for the 4 strings on each channel for each color. So because I'm using 2 controllers and I only need 24 channels for this tree, 8 of each color, I have 8 extra channels. And the first year when I used these mega trees, I also had my maple trunks, which I've already discussed once, covered in white only, and I used those as like a piston action on base beats. So I had 8 channels on those since my first year, and I've kept that same channel configuration ever since. So there are actually, you can see the brown wires here coming out. There's 8 SPT1 wires that come out of the remaining 8 channels on these 2 controllers, which head out to the maple tree there. Okay, now it's time to talk about my windows. I have all of the windows outlined in lights on the front of the house as well as both sides of the house, so you can see from all viewing angles that they're lit up. And the first year I did windows, I just put screws in each corner of the window and I ran the lights from screw to screw. Well, that was nice the first year, but I needed a more efficient way to redecorate every year. So starting my second year, and then now this will be the third year for these, are my window frames. And I made them like many other people do, out of just 1/2-inch PVC pipe. And I didn't glue these together or use any bolts or stuff to put them together. You could probably glue them if you're worried about them coming apart, but what I did was first is I painted all my pipe. You can see here I painted it green, and I used a special spray paint for plastic so it sealed up really well. So this is the only item in the display that I didn't use my method of priming with oil first and then using house paint. This is just plastic spray paint. I painted them green because it matches all the lights, because I figure I'm going to be putting so many lights on the window, I may as well paint it green to match the strings rather than try and match the color of the windows. So I have, on most of the windows, I have between 200 and 300 lights of each color. So again, 3 channels on everything, 1 for each color. So I have individual control on each window. And you can see I just ran the cords for the windows from the side of the house here. Just runs right up the side of the house, and I have them zip tied together. And as you might have seen in the very beginning of the video, I do have my Cat5 on this side of the house because I do have my computer in that window up at the top, so it happens to run down along with the SPT1 wires here. And the window frames, after I made the frames, I measured everything in the summer so I knew how wide to make my window frames, and then I attached them by putting 2 little small cup hooks in the top of the frame, and then I have screws that go into our old wood windows, and each cup hook just hangs on the screw. So if we ever do replace our windows, we'll have to think of another way of attaching them, but in the meantime, while we have the old wood windows, just a screw in each corner with a cup hook on the pipe works fine. And so they just hang from the 2 top screws, and everything else just kind of wedges into place because there's so many lights on them. They don't blow around at all. And you can see here's where they all plug in here in the corner. So I got 1 plug for each color. And the other thing that's really unique in my display is the fact that you probably can't see because of all the bad glare, but inside the window here is actually our indoor Christmas tree in our living room. And then we have a Christmas tree upstairs in the bedroom, as well as a wreath and a garland on the other side that show through the window. So I want to control those as part of the display. So what I did was, actually, you can see here, drilled a small hole through the storm window, our old storm window, so I can run an SPT1 wire through the window, and it just fits right underneath the window sash that closes on it, and actually controls the lights on the inside from the controllers that sit out here around the corner. And it's a really neat effect, but people don't always notice it at first, but the lights inside are actually going on and off as well that shine in front of the windows. So I know a lot of people that do lightorama, they probably want to have a Christmas tree in their house, but the Christmas tree always has to be on. But doing it this way, it can still go on and off with the display. If I ever wanted to get around it, if we do get new windows, what I'll probably do is put exterior plugs into the wall around the corner here, and then just run wiring through the inside of the house to get to it. But it's a really neat effect when you can have lights go on and off inside the house. So you can see here I have more wires that go up around the front door as well, to go up to the top window there, and then the second story windows. And all of these wires, I use brown against the brick so it disappears at night, and you really can't see it at all, even with the lights on. If I had a white house, what I would do is I'd buy white SPT1, because you can buy it from some of the vendors, and that way you could have it disappear against your house then too. And there's also, I've even seen in some of the big box stores, gold colored wire. So if you say you had a tan house, you might find that best to hide your wires running up your house. You can see here around the front door. Front door I use in sequences much like the windows normally, and for the front door I just have C9s and icicles attached to it. Here I actually do the icicles double thick, and then just garland on each pillar. And these trees here I actually do have tomato cages on these two potted trees only, and it's just garland wrapped around tomato cages to make it look like a tree. And these do look like really nice potted trees when they're all finished. And these have been a part of the original static display from long ago, which is why they have the bows on them as well. And again, like I said before, the wires on the front porch here go underneath the sidewalk through my conduit, and that way both sides of the front porch come on and off at the same time because they share the same channels. Okay, here we are on the first floor of the house now, off the east side of the house where the sunroom is. And you can see how I have my lights attached to the gutters. All I do is I use the built-in clip on the C9 socket. These are all store-bought C9s in 25 count, and I just use the built-in clips on them that slide right over the gutter. And I zip tie these 3 strings together about every foot, so when I do pull them off, they all stay together as one string, which works out really well. And the interesting thing about store-bought C9s is that depending upon the brand of lights you use, the clip may be on one side of the socket versus the other. So you can see the white lights I used were a Walmart brand, and then the red and green were from Lowe's. Well, I wanted to have the power input over here on this side of the sunroom, so the lights go all the way around to the front of the display and end right there where the mega trees are on the front. So I actually plug these in the back. And it worked out great for the Walmart strings, because you can see there's the female plug and the male plug, and it keeps going this direction. However, the Lowe's strings had the plug on the socket clip on the opposite side, so the male plug was on the wrong side of the string I needed it on. So I used vampire plugs to flip the string around. So what used to be a female plug on this side of the red and green strings, I cut off with wire cutters and just put on a male plug, vampire plug. And on the other end where the male plug was, I used a female vampire plug, so I was able to flip the direction of the C9 lights so I can still use the clips on them. And you can see where I did that right there. Now, because they're C9s, I was make sure, like I said before, to make sure my polarity lines up, because all the wires are marked, which is the neutral, based on some sort of either printing or other marking on one of the wires. Also, on all of my C9 runs, I have a strobe line. You can see that as the black wire there, which is also just zip tied to the other C9 wires. And I just use the snap-on clip that go with the strobe lights. The C9 socket you can attach on anywhere on an SPT wire, and the strobe just goes right there between two of the bulbs. And you can see I run them every several feet. Another strobe right there, and there's another strobe down the line right there on the corner. And again, works really well. I just run it all with the C9s. So because these are all bundled up, when it comes time to store the lights from the gutters, since I don't have attached to anything, they just start on one end, and once you get one end going, the whole rest of them just slide right off, and I just coil them up and put them in a container, and it works really well. Also, I wanted to show how the C9s even fit through the gutter guards here on the east side of the house, where I have the gutter guards to prevent the leaves from the tree getting in the gutters. And I use the open hole gutter guards that don't work well on the pine needles, but they do stop the leaves. So that way, you can see here, the clip still fits through the hole in the gutter guard. And they're a little more difficult to put through, but they do hold on pretty well once you get them in. And you can see they did line up pretty straight. So no complaints on that, and I did want to show you that even with gutter guards, you still can use the built-in clip on the C9. A great thing about having this one-story roof off the side of the house here is that it's much easier to get items to the second story when you can run them up to the one story first, especially here where we have a relatively flat roof, where I can stage everything and get it set up, then have a much smaller ladder from here to the second story to get the next set of trips up to the top. And it sells it a lot better than having one long ladder all the way up to the top to have to carry stuff up. So it's really nice having this roof here. I'll show you the unique thing about my icicle lights. All of my icicle lights that run along the gutters, which is almost all of them in the display, actually mount on the fascia board right below the gutter. I don't actually use the gutter clips for their purpose on the gutter. I use them to slip over the fascia board. We have an older home with open fascias that you can see here, open soffits. So I can use the clip to go right over the fascia board like that. And the friction just holds them on, and it actually works pretty well. No complaints about it at all. The only other thing is that because I don't have any actual mechanism to keep the clip from falling off if there's too much force on it, if some of them do start to blow off, it's a domino effect all the way around the house, which actually makes them easy to take down because I just pull off one end and they'll come off all the way around. But I do, about every 10 feet or so, or every 15 feet, I do put a zip tie over the gutter to the top of C9s to keep them from falling as a domino effect if they ever do. So you can see the icicle lights line up great. And the nice thing about having them below the gutter is that they never blow up on top of the roof this way in high winds. And it also makes a cool effect if I alternate the C9s and the icicle lights alternately. It makes a pretty good jumping effect, which I originally borrowed from Bill Vaughn's display. He had a sandstorm sequence that had that effect, and I did the same song with that same effect, and it's a really cool scene when you see the house looks like it's jumping up and down. So I credit him for that idea. While I'm up here, I can show you the cross. This is another part of the original stack display from years ago, which we've still kept. We have a big chimney here on the side of the house that faces the side of the street here where a lot of people start lining up to wait in line. I used the cross here I made using just 2x4s that I stuck together, and I just stapled a whole bunch of clear minis to the side of it, just clear on the cross. And it comes on in some of the Christmas songs. I don't use it a whole lot. I use it sparingly if it fits the meaning of the song. And this is just one channel that runs. I actually have a 16 gauge cord here that runs all the way down to the side of the house here. And it's about 6 foot tall cross, and it's pretty heavy. It just has one screw that goes through into a masonry screw into the chimney. Okay, keep moving our way up. Now we're on top of the roof here, 2 stories up. Got a good view of the 2 maple trees and all the lights on the branches that go down to the trunks. And the radio sign there and the street. And here we are where the chimney and the cross are. And I want to show you how I do my C9s on the ridges of the roof. This is another kind of thing that I thought of to make it easier to pull stuff on and off as well as mounting it. Since I have so many C9 lights, so many bulbs, a bulb every 4 inches with 12-inch spacing on each color, I want an easier way to mount them on the roof. And the way I went about that was I just used strips of 1/2-inch plywood that I ripped to 2 inches wide and then painted black. Of course, primed gray with oil and then painted black with house paint. At least now I've done house paint. Before, I did use spray paint on these since it was my first year, which was a fairly bad idea because it did start flaking off. So this year I went back through everything and I put down another coat of primer, good primer, and then finally painted with the house paint. You can see why I have paint all over all the wires now, because I did it after they're already attached, and they're holding up much better this year than they have other years where they started to flake off. So you can see all I did was I just ran the lights down the strips of wood and then just used a staple gun and stapled them right to the strips of wood. And these strips of wood are 8 feet long, so I used on most of the hips. It took just under 3 strips. I think the last one is only about 6 foot long, but they just fold up like an accordion. So there's 2 joints, and you can see I also zip tied every so often, just in case the staples were ever to fail or something like that. And like everything else on the gutters, there's strobe lights that run down the side as well. And of course I have my strobe to the side, not facing up, just in case any condensation ever gets inside of them. And all it takes is just a shingle clip about every couple feet or so, and I just put one on each side, you can see there, and then I put a zip tie around it, and it holds it pretty strong by itself. It doesn't take much else than that. Here's one of the joints I mentioned. You can see I just left a gap there between the 2 bulbs, and I put zip ties on each end, so when I fold them up, if there's any stress in the wire, it doesn't rip the bulbs and the staples out. Again, so here's just one joint, and there's another one farther down the line, and they just fold up to the 3 strips like an accordion, and then I put one big zip tie around them to help carry them off the roof to the first story there, and then the next ladder down to the ground, and it works out pretty well. So I have all the hips set up that way. And the other nice thing, since I'm using C9s or any other bulb type light where you have retrofit bulbs like LED retrofit lights, which will go in the same type of strings, since all these lights are arranged in parallel circuits, I can cut them wherever I want. So here's a great example where I have my power coming up from the corner of the house here, and then this roof light string here feeds the power up to this corner, and then I need to feed the power down the ridge as well as down this hip to this side. And because I'm using regular C9 lights, or if you use LED retrofits, it'd be the same principle. Another great use of vampire plugs, just cut the strings where you need to and then use vampire plugs to connect them. So you can see here's my incoming lead, and I have 2 females put on. Here's how you can show an inline vampire plug. All you do is cut the little tab off the end there, so when you slide your cap on, you still have room on the other end for the wire to come out. And then here's a male vampire plug here, and then here's one of the original plugs here. You can see everything labeled red for red lights, and then there's the green there, and then there's the white there, and then here's my one labeled strobe. So you know that one's the strobe one. So there's a great use of SPT wire and vampire plugs right there, and why using this kind of C9 wire with the bulbs is great, because you can cut it wherever you want, which you can't do with a standard LED string you might buy from the store. It only works with incandescents or retrofit LEDs. So the way I have the roof set up is I have 3 sets of 3 channels. The west side of the roof there is 3 channels, 1 for each color, and then I have the north side here, 3 channels for each color, and then this east side is 3 channels for each color. So I can still do a chase across the roof if I want to. And you can see here on the dormer, the way I've actually done the dormer is I just used shingle clips around the dormer here, because we have a curved dormer, so in order to get the lights on, I just had to put a clip on each one. But this is easy because it fits right over the drip edge of the dormer, so they slip on pretty easy. And it's kind of a neat effect to have the dormer lit up along with everything else. So you can see for the dormer, these would go on with the north side lights. So I just ran a cord from the dormer up the valley here to the top, and then this cord you can barely see even when the lights are on. It kind of blends in with the roof pretty well. So all my roof lights are their own channels, like I said, three channels of each color across. And the gutter I split up on its own set of channels too, so I can turn the gutters on independently of the roof. People have asked in the past with my method of using the wood strips to mount the C9s to the ridges and hips, if the wood ever warps. The answer is yes, sometimes, but not too bad. This is on the entire roof. This is the worst section I have. And you can see here, it's only warped up about 1 inch or 2, which from far away, you can't even hardly tell it's warped that much. And even then, if I had just put an extra clip here, right where the warp is, it'd probably keep it from raising up. And another section I had a warp on my first year, which is farther down the line here, all I did was, you can see, I just cut the wood in another spot. So instead of warping up, it's just 2 smaller pieces, and then added some extra zip ties where the wire crosses the joint, and it works fine. So I'm not too concerned about any warping on these boards, really. I have, dozens of them in use, and out of all of them, this is the worst one I have, and many of them aren't even warped at all. So like you can see on this run on the other side there, you can see it's virtually straight as an arrow. No problems at all. All right, here we go. Last thing on the list is my monster of a Holdman star. Again, I got the plans from Richard Holman, which is why it's a Holdman star. His plans on his website from when he did his display. And I ran with this the first year I did animation, because I wanted a big accent on top of the roof here. And I loved the look of his star on his house, so I wanted to use a similar plans to make it. And I did. The plywood plans that I used are ones exactly off of his website, where he had to drill 1 size hole to get the bulb to fit through, and then a little bit wider of a size hole, you can see here in the back, for the socket to fit through. Yeah, right there. So you can see there's a wider diameter hole in the back, so the socket has room to fit up against it. So I made the whole thing out of, I think it was 5/8 plywood I might have used on this, and I just used the sockets, and put the sockets up against the back, and the bulb screwed in actually is what holds it into the frame itself. And the star is 3 channels. So the cross in the middle is one, and then the flare is one, and then the top, bottom, left, and right points are our third one. And by alternating the channels, you can make it twinkle with the right kind of fades. And my base is pretty unique to match the roof line. It's just 2x4s, they're all screwed together, and you can see I actually put together a pretty strong bracket here. I got one bracket on each end so it holds its angle where they're screwed together. And the star just screws right to that, and then I also have additional metal brackets screwed in to the side there to hold it even stronger. And you can see the black base was my original base for it. So it hangs over the front here to give it stability from a wind from the south, as well as from sliding off the back of the roof. And then I have, you can see the black base here, and the different colored wood here is actually an amendment I made to it last year. After the second year for the star, we had a horrible windstorm with 50 to 60 mile-an-hour winds in the middle of December. And it was enough to blow icicles off the roof, and my star held on all the way till 1 o'clock in the morning with a big thump. It actually blew straight backwards with a north wind, pivoted right there on the end where the black wood is, and then fell right back on the dormer. By some miracle, it didn't fall off the roof, it just landed on the dormer and stayed there. And that year I was using 180 pounds of sandbags. Well, since then I've upgraded to 240 pounds of sandbags, plus with the additional length off the back here, you can see I extended it another 3 feet to keep the wind from flipping it over on its back from a north wind when we get the big winter storms. So it's one heck of a wind sail up here, but it doesn't really move much at all anymore. It was just that 1 year before I added the extra base on the back and the sandbags, so it's held up really well. The only problem is, because it is so heavy, having to lug all the sandbags up along with the star itself, which when I bring it down, it just folds off on the back. So you can see the back support here, the angled part comes off, and then I undo a couple screws where the vertical support attaches, and the whole star folds back flat against the back here, and then so it all comes off in one giant piece. So this small bracket on the back comes off as one piece, and then when the star folds back, I screw it together as one giant piece. And I can handle it okay with one person, but then once I get it down to the edge here, it takes 2 people to move it to the next roof and then down to the ground. So it probably weighs a good 70 to 80 pounds, even without the sandbags on it. So next year, I hope to make a wireframe of some sort, still using all of the C9s to get the big effect I want. But it's just, the problem is so much weight to carry up here every year is kind of a pain in the neck. So here's a great view of the back. You can see my big base here extends all the way down where I added it, and then a sandbag there, and I have 3 sandbags stacked up on the front part. And then you can see all of the C9 bulbs sticking through the back of the star, as well as my angled brackets on the back here to keep the star from bending left or right from the wind, which there's no wind from a west wind from that direction. It has no really effect on it because it's so narrow from that direction. It's the south and the north winds I worry about. But like I said, since adding the wider base on the back here and the extra sandbag, it's held up really well with all of the wind. You can see my 3 wires for the 3 channels that make it twinkle run down the star here, and then over here to the west roof, which you can see same setup, more plywood with lights stapled to it, plywood strips, and then you can see the star channels run all the way down the edge. So I have a location here on this corner where a lot of the wires come up, and then I have another location off over in that corner where the other half of the wires come up for the roof. So I only have those 2 locations.